world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Monday, January 19th. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the United States. Now, that is always celebrated on the third Monday of January. It is a day to honor and celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was a civil rights activist in the 1960s. He did a lot of good work stirring up resistance to the things that had been going on at the time, including segregation and separate but equal and all of those things, and pushing for civil rights. Now, Dr. King, his whole policy was nonviolence. He wanted peaceful protests. And I know I've seen other creators talking about it, saying that his whole thing was to stir up the violent rhetoric coming from the people who were against everything he stood for, and he knew that that would be put out on television and it would turn the tide, and that might be true. But the simple fact is he was pushing for nonviolent change and resistance. And that is a message we still need to this day. Now, there's a lot of people that think just because Martin Luther King Jr. And civil rights happened in the 60s, that settled everything. But all you have to do is look around and see that it wasn't settled. We still have problems in this country when it comes to racism and things surrounding racial tensions, etc. And it's only going to get better when we continue to put the pressure on. We can't pass a couple of things and say problem solved. We need to make it so that the people who have those racist tendencies, etc., are deciding that they just don't have a place in modern society. Now, you may have noticed I was gone for a couple of days. Did not have the podcast put out on, I think it was Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Now, I had Fridays recorded, and Zoom stalled again, like it has a couple of times in the past. I don't know what happened there. Still hasn't finished processing. It's irritating. Friday night, or no, that was Friday. Saturday, sat down to record, and I got roped into TJ the Plumber's live. You may know TJ. He's a frequent guest over on the Rational Boomer podcast and on the lives there. Occasionally, when I do bring guests up on my lives, he is a guest as well as one of my moderators. Well, he went live himself, and I was only going to join in for a little bit, and he said he was going to be live for like an hour or so, and we ended up going for like 3.5. And that just, I ended up not having the time to sit down and record. Same with Sunday night, with having some other things going on and then having to be up super early this morning for work. I just was not able to get anything recorded, so I missed out, and I apologize for that. I do have plans to get back and going. I think after I record this, hopefully I don't run into any snags getting it uploaded. But after I record this, I am going to sit down on TikTok and try to do about an hour and a half live, and try to go from there, get in and do a live for tomorrow's podcast. And depending on what we cover in the live and any other news articles and stuff that I find, I may do a small video, or I know I'm definitely going to try to get some more TikToks recorded to go up tomorrow throughout the day, and try to do more videos and more content, because there's always stuff to talk about, because this administration is so off the rails. So keep an eye out for that. Now, one of the things I did a video on over the weekend is something that is going to be discussed quite a bit going forward. And that is this article that came out where it was an interview with Representative Don Bacon, a Republican from Omaha. And Representative Bacon came out and said that if Donald Trump decides to attack Greenland, that that would be a bridge too far, that they have the votes already in order to remove Donald Trump, that he would be impeached and removed. Now, those are pretty strong words from the Republican Party talking about their president and the guy who can supposedly do no wrong. If we watch and how they deal with everything involving Donald Trump, they pretty much have given him free reign to do whatever he wants. But according to Representative Bacon, they have everything they need. And I've been saying for a long time that I believe they are holding meetings behind closed doors, meetings Donald Trump is not privy to. And this seems to confirm that. Now, he said in this interview that they have the votes not only to impeach, but that he also mentioned removal. Now, I think when they go and they make that move on Donald Trump, I think it is going to happen very quick and very fast. He is not going to see it coming. Now, if they were going after, say, Joe Biden or even like the Democrats, okay, when they say, well, I'm going to be introducing articles of impeachment later this week, makes a great headline, then nothing happens. I think what's going to happen with the Republicans is when they decide that enough is enough and they are moving on Donald Trump, that they are going to uh, decide that it's time to move. You're going to see the articles of impeachment already having been drafted, full context, and they're going to bring it in, hold a vote, and I think it's going to get voted on and passed ridiculously quick. Like if it is led by a Republican now, if it's led by a Democrat, that's an entirely different story. Okay, but if a Republican representative, say Don Bacon, introduces articles of impeachment on Donald Trump, I think they move quick, fast, and in a hurry. It comes out, they get the impeachment moving, and I think maybe even same day they start the trial in the Senate. Now, when they go to do the trial in the Senate, they would have to pass rules for the trial. Would they be holding the trial with uh, time to do other business? Are they going to be holding 8-hour sessions every single day? What is that going to look like? I think that trial is going to start very quickly, very fast, and it is going to move to a speed at which Donald Trump's head is going to spin. Now, why? Why do I think they're going to move quickly? Well, because Donald Trump is going to try to burn the Republican Party down around him when they decide to pull the trigger. We've been talking about this idea that the Republicans will get to a point when they say enough is enough. And now we hear Don Bacon talking about removing him and that they have the votes, at least on this issue. Now, it's kind of sad that invading Greenland, which is a NATO ally, is the final step. There are so many other things that Donald Trump has done that should have already been a step too far. Having ICE agents rounding up American citizens, shooting American citizens, all of the grift that he has going on, the invasion of Venezuela, just everything that has happened in this administration. They keep saying, no, it's not quite enough. No, it's not quite enough. His administration delaying the release of the Epstein files. Everything that is going on should have been a bridge too far, but the Republicans keep backing out. They keep saying no, it's not enough yet. No, we still support Donald Trump because they're afraid of what is going to happen if they turn on the MAGA base. Okay, that MAGA base, that 30% of the Republican Party that will not vote for Republicans if they turn on Donald Trump. They're worried about that. They want to get reelected. So they're trying to figure out this strategy and how to manage it and how to do this and how to do that. So they're looking at it and they're trying to be strategic. Well, if they move on Donald Trump over Greenland, he may be backing them into a corner where they don't have a choice about what to do here, right? Where they may finally say enough is enough. You're going after our ally in Denmark because Greenland belongs to Denmark, and that uh, we can't have you disrupting NATO, so we're gonna push back here, and they could do that, right? They could remove Donald Trump. And according to Don Bacon, like I said, they have the votes. And that's shocking, right? Now, in the past, when the Republicans have been in this position, the last time they were here was with Nixon. And they went to Nixon ahead and they said, hey, we've got the votes to remove you. You'd better resign or we will remove you. And Nixon saw the writing on the wall and said, okay, I don't want to be the first president removed by Congress. I'm going to resign. I don't think Donald Trump does that this time. That is not his mindset. He is not a person who backs down from anything. So when the Republicans decide to turn on Donald Trump, it's going to be fast, right? It's not going to be a Nixon level thing where they're going to give Donald Trump the ability to walk away. I just don't think he's got it in him to walk away. You add the malignant narcissism with the dementia, and it's not going to work, right? He's not going to be able to see the logic unless you catch him in a moment of clarity with one hell of an offer where he would be willing to step aside. Now, they are going to have to do something, and when they do, um, it's going to be too late, right? They're worried about the midterms. They could lose 30, 40, 50 seats in the House, and they could lose the Senate. Now, after they lose the midterms, could Donald Trump get impeached then? Well, of course. Why couldn't he? But it's and again, Republicans may be more likely to actually act on Donald Trump after the midterms, where they could put the blame on the Democrats and say, well, see, it's those evil Democrats that are getting rid of Donald Trump, despite the fact that Republicans would have to agree to remove Donald Trump, because I don't see any way Democrats can end up with the necessary number of votes in order to uh, remove Donald Trump without Republican support. Um, so this whole thing is getting out of hand. Donald Trump is uh, ramping up the pressure on uh, Greenland and NATO, trying to force uh, them into giving him his way. Now, one of the things that we heard over the weekend was that Donald Trump is going to be pushing tariffs again on NATO allies, 10 to 25%. And I think they start in February. Now, he could back out, and he may back out. But basically, he has said, well, if you don't give me Greenland, if NATO and Denmark doesn't agree to let me have what I want, I'm just going to put tariffs on you. Well, we've been over it before. Who pays the tariff? The company that brings the product in pays the tariff, and that gets added to the cost of goods sold, and ultimately it is paid for by the American consumer. So his plan to punish Europe and Denmark and NATO countries for not agreeing to give us Greenland, which is a sovereign part of Denmark, is to make Americans pay more for goods. Doesn't make a lick of sense. First of all, we have no business trying to acquire Greenland. It is not for sale. He has been told repeatedly that it is not for sale. But Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't like the word no. He never has. And like the petulant toddler that he is going after whatever he wants. Now, uh, he's saying about these tariffs, we're still waiting on the Supreme Court to decide whether or not his tariffs are legal. And they could come back and say, no, the national emergencies that you have been claiming aren't real emergencies, and the word tariff is not in the law you are pointing to give yourself justification for you putting the tariffs on. So no emergency, no tariff, and you don't have the tariff authority that sits in Congress. And that I think is going to be the ultimate outcome there. But see, Donald Trump is trying to use the tariffs as a bargaining chip while he has them, and he's trying to force Denmark to give up Greenland. It's not going to work. Now, why is he so focused on Greenland? Well, he claims that it is because of Russia and China. Now, neither have ever made any moves toward acquiring Greenland. And in fact, because of the NATO charter, we are required to defend Greenland should they try. And because of other treaties, we're allowed to build bases on Greenland, and we have a couple. In fact, sounds like Denmark and Greenland are open to allowing the United States to build even larger bases over there. So we could put whatever we want there, basically, and defend it however we want. But see, Donald Trump doesn't think that that's good enough. He even said that, well, being able to put a base there is like renting a property. Now, I'm cleaning it up because he wasn't this coherent, but uh, he said putting a base there is like a rental property. You don't defend a rental, but you would defend it if you own it. And he thinks we absolutely have to own Greenland. But why? We don't. He's thinking out, he wants the big piece of land because in a lot of the maps, Greenland looks huge, right? And it's a rather large area, but it is not as big as what some of the maps make it out to be. And he thinks that if he adds Greenland, he's going to be remembered as some great hero. Now, why is he pushing so much stuff about his memory? Like, how do people remember him? He's trying to build a ballroom that'll be named after himself. He very tackily put his name on the Kennedy Center, and there's been talk about him trying to get on Mount Rushmore, and just other and this Arc de Triomphe, the Arc de Trump that he wants to build, and everything he's doing is he's talking about legacy and things. Why is he doing it? Well, I believe because of how bad his health is, that he knows his time is limited. I think he is very aware that, or at least he has been told, and that doctors believe that he has limited time left. Look at his health; it's not getting any better. He's asking for less and less to do as president of the United States. He's asking for a lighter schedule. That was made public recently, um, and he is asking. A lot of days, and according to his official schedule, he doesn't even get up before 10:30. So he doesn't start before noon and he's done by 5. He's putting in a 5-hour workday. Well, it's because he has limited abilities anymore and he's asking to do even less. And there are some days where he has really good days and he puts up you know, it looks like they have him hopped up on something is I guess what I'm trying to say. And that would actually track with the bruising on his hands. We see the bruising on the back of his right hand, and he tried to claim it was from vigorous handshaking. But then now the bruising is starting to go to the other hand. Well, when they cannot get an IV in your arm, they move to the hand. And if they can't get an IV in either arm, they are using the back of his hands, and they probably blew out the vein in the back of his right hand, so now they have to move on to his left to give his right a chance to heal. They are keeping him propped up with a bunch of medication, and I don't even know uh, what it is, and I don't even know if he knows what it is. Because according to him, all he's taking is 325 milligrams of aspirin, which is 4 times the recommended low dose aspirin that they give people who are having heart problems to thin his blood. Now, it is entirely possible that they are giving him something else and telling him it is aspirin. One, I don't think he is smart enough to question it. And two, with his narcissism, uh, he may not be willing to take anything else unless it is something very simple. And going with uh, the fact that it's aspirin and not anything major would fit with his style of I'm so healthy, and he could spin that right. I think the reason he's going after Greenland so bad is because of his health, and that he knows his time is limited, or at least the doctors have told him the time is limited, and he's at least partially aware, and he's trying to do everything he can before his time is up, because he knows when his time is up, he's not going to be able to do anything else, and I think he's worried that what is probably going to happen, I think in his mind, he's worried about that. And what's probably going to happen is when he's gone, anything with his name on it is going to be renamed. The name is going to get taken down, and that he is worried that if he doesn't do something to build up his legacy, that people aren't going to remember him fondly. And we're not. He is not going to go down in history as being a great president. And that's part of what he is worried about. Now, beyond the tariffs for Greenland, it came out today that there was a text exchange between the Prime Minister of Norway and Donald Trump, where he basically said in this text exchange that the reason he is going to take Greenland is because he did not get the Nobel Peace Prize, is effectively what he said. Now, there was a little more to it, but basically he said that he stopped at least 8 wars and he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, and they wouldn't give it to him. So the time to be thinking about peace is over, and he's going to take Greenland. What Donald Trump fails to realize, because he is an idiot, is that that kind of thinking is the exact reason as to why he would never get a Nobel Peace Prize. He doesn't see the fact that he is talking about taking Greenland by force, that he has sent the military into Venezuela, and that he is talking about using the military against American citizens as not being a criteria for the peace prize. He doesn't care what the criterias are. He just wants the prize because Barack Obama has one, several other notable figures have one, and he wants it as a bragging point. Now, Maria Machado, the 2025 winner, I thought, when she gave him her physical medal, that would be enough to calm him down. But I don't know if it was because the Nobel Committee came out and said multiple times, or if it was something else where they said that no matter what happens, no matter who physically owns the medal, it doesn't change who the winner is. It cannot be revoked. It cannot be rejected once awarded or once accepted, and it cannot be transferred. So that no matter what, if just because Donald Trump physically holds the medal in his hand, does not mean that he has actually earned it. Now, I was thinking that maybe her giving him the medal was going to calm him down for a little while and, appease him. And everybody is doing their best to appease him right now, at least the people around him and other leaders and stuff. They are trying to do this they're trying to keep him from blowing off the handle and making these rash decisions. They are treating him like I've seen some toddlers be treated. I've called him a toddler for a long time. But what happens when you're trying to play some kind of a game with a toddler and they're losing? Well, suddenly I've seen people do it, right? Their kid or their grandkid is playing a game with them, something simple, and they purposely make a dumb mistake, and they go back to the start, or they get set back so where they're not losing anymore. You could make the smart move and try to actively win, but instead you give up and you let the toddler win because you don't want to offend them. Now, for my Star Wars fans out there, it is similar but different to the scene from A New Hope, where R2D2 is playing galactic chess, it looks like, with Chewbacca, and Chewbacca is getting mad because he is losing. And C3PO tells him to let the Wookiee win because Wookiees are known for ripping your arms out of their socket when they lose. And that, without the violent part of it, that's kind of how they are treating Donald Trump. They are just trying to give him what he wants and pacify him just so they can get through the next day and keep going. Now, Donald Trump is ramping up pressure on Greenland, and there was talk over the weekend that he had activated 1,500, or told them to prepare 1,500 paratroopers to be ready for a mission. And a lot of people thought that this was going to be him sending the paratroopers uh, Minnesota, uh, into Minneapolis, except it could be a move to send them into Greenland. And I know that's just because of where his focus seems to be right now. It's on everything going on in Greenland, so that he may be thinking that he's going to send 1,500 paratroopers and that's all it would take. I mean, listen to the way he talks about Greenland, and he's talking about, well, they only have dog sleds and things like that. They don't have any sort of defenses. So maybe that's what he thinks is all it's going to take. Now, I haven't seen anything yet that he has confirmed any military action in either area, um, but it wouldn't surprise me if that is his game plan. Now, speaking of Minneapolis and these ICE activities in Minneapolis, there are millions of undocumented illegal immigrants in Texas, in Florida. And that's not where ICE is focusing on. They've got thousands of agents up in Minneapolis right now. And there's maybe, by some estimates, and I realize they're estimates, 150,000 undocumented illegal immigrants in the entire state of Minnesota. But this is where Donald Trump is focusing on. Now, these ICE agents, somebody leaked a list of the new recruits for ICE that have joined this term, this during this administration, and some of the names include, Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio. And I've been saying that that's why we don't hear anything about the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, Patriot Front, that they all got roped into ICE. Those Meal Team 6 Gravy Seal motherfuckers who couldn't make it in the actual military, and they couldn't qualify for police department or law enforcement. So now they spend their days uh, training and practicing and marching and all this stuff as some kind of a paramilitary, um, basically as cosplay patriots. And they got wrapped into ICE now, and that's part of why ICE is acting the way it is. Now, one of the things we are also hearing is that they are using AI in order to uh, search through the resumes for these people that are entering or trying to enter uh, as ICE agents. And if you have any sort of military or police training anywhere in your record, that you automatically get a pass, right? Like, oh, you get your training cut way down to like 4 weeks, which is even shorter than what I had been talking about in a previous podcast. They were supposed to get 18 weeks of training, and then I heard they cut it down to 47 days for Donald Trump. And now we are hearing anybody with any sort of military or police training at all, or if you have the word officer in your uh, thing, if it sounds like you have done anything close to law enforcement, that you would end up getting it cut down to just 4 weeks. When that explains why ICE is doing whatever it wants, basically, um, and that they are pushing the envelope as far as they are. Now, we are hearing a lot about what's going on up in Minneapolis, and there is a lot of protests going on, most of them peaceful. Um, but we are seeing some videos of ICE agents backing down and running away from peaceful protesters just because they are vastly outnumbered. And that's what bullies do. And peaceful protests, and it's a good thing we are talking about peaceful protests today of all days on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But peaceful protests are a good way to get things done. Also, recording things like that. One of the other things I saw as a tip if you are going out protesting would be to have a burner phone, one that you don't care about losing should they detain you. Um, and even though maybe it's not fully trying to hide any sort of criminal activity, but if you have a cheap prepaid burner phone with just a couple of contacts in it or whatever, just enough that you would end up um, not worrying about whether or not you lose it, and then you could also, uh, record and upload and go live and things like that. Now we are seeing some horrendous things out of these ICE agents. There was a video I saw earlier today where this guy had a camera set up on a tripod. He was in a fox mask and he was just dancing in front of these ICE agents. And all of a sudden they decide they didn't like it and they storm around him, threw him to the ground, threw him in cuffs. Now, that's illegal, for one. He was not threatening them, he wasn't doing anything wrong. They just decided they didn't like the fact that he was dancing, and they probably thought he was mocking them. So they decided to cuff him. Now, on Friday night, there was a court order where a judge told ICE and reminded them that they are not to use non lethal ammunition, pepper spray. They are not to detain or arrest anybody for just protesting and shouting things at them, as long as they are not actively getting in the way of official duties and trying to obstruct. Standing there protesting is a constitutional right. And uh, the ICE had to be reminded by a judge on that fact. And they're still violating it. What these people do not realize, these ICE agents, these Gravy SEALs, MEAL Team 6, that they will ultimately pay a price for everything they have done when we get power back in Congress, when we get to the presidency. That it is going to be uh, there's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be all kinds of charges leveled against ICE agents for their actions in everything they have done. And not just ICE, it's everybody up and down this administration. There is going to be tons of things coming out, and people are going to ultimately be held accountable. We just have to get there. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is something I've been seeing a lot of people talking about is, well, nonviolent protests aren't the answer. What are we going to do? How are we going to get to change? First of all, armed protests are definitely not the answer. Violence is not the answer. Okay, we do not want to give them the reason. Okay, when we are if we become violent, they are going to say, see, the left can't protest without becoming violent, and it's going to give uh, all sorts of cover stories for Donald Trump and this administration to do things like try to unleash the military against American citizens. It's bad enough we are dealing with ICE, and we don't want to give him that much, uh, that kind of a reason. But beyond that, I'm seeing other people talking about how, well, the midterms are too far away. We can't vote ourselves out of this. Yes, we can, because it's not just the midterms, okay? There are special elections that keep happening. And when these elections happen, either Democrats win or Democrats are making historic gains in areas they shouldn't be winning in, which is sending a clear message. And the closer we get toward the midterms, these Republicans are going to be willing to make that move against Donald Trump that I was talking about earlier in the podcast. They are going to decide that they have to make a move. And when they make that decision, it's going to be all because they are worried about getting reelected. Okay. And one thing you can count on is politicians care about their own power. Now, a large number of politicians are not seeking reelection, which will help the Democrats in the midterms gain seats. Because when you do not have the incumbent sitting there, it does force the electorate, at least some of them. I know MAGA and a big section of Republicans will always vote for a Republican no matter what. But some of the independents will actually look at the candidates. Whereas when there's an incumbent, they go, well, they've already been doing the job, might as well vote for him again. Or in some cases, they look around and go, well, yeah, things aren't going too bad. I'll go ahead and I'll vote for him again. So incumbents being gone helps the Democrats, especially in these deep red districts. Most of the seats where people are not running again are Republican. The ones where it's Democrats, it's people like Nancy Pelosi who are in their 80s and who are saying, I'm not running again. We need to focus on getting some of these older people out of Congress. And at least some of them have decided that now is the time to not run, and they are going to step aside and let somebody else have a chance. Now, when the Democrats get back in power in the House and in the Senate, they need to take a strong look at leadership and decide, are these the people we really want calling the shots? People like Hakeem Jeffries. Now, I had hope for Hakeem Jeffries as minority leader when Nancy Pelosi said she was stepping out of leadership. I had hope that he was going to be great. Problem is, it seems like he is listening to anything and everything she has to say and is not coming up with his own ideas. It sounds like business as usual. So we need to look at, is Hakeem going to be the leader of the Democratic Party? And then we have to worry about the Senate. Okay, is Chuck Schumer going to be the person we put up as majority leader? I don't think so. I don't think it should be Schumer. He's been rather ineffective as majority leader. He has been rather ineffective as minority leader. Sure, they got some things passed when he was majority leader, but if he would have had a little more, um, if he could have done more to get Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin in line with the Senate, the first 2 years of Biden's administration, we could have ended up potentially getting even more accomplished. But that's not what happened. Instead, you had Chuck Schumer get through it with what he could get done, still kind of caved to the Republicans, and did a lot of let's just go get along to get along. Um, Same with initially, right after Donald Trump got elected, there was a government shutdown, or there was a looming government shutdown. And they just passed everything, knowing what the Republicans had planned. So, oh, yeah, we're just going to fund the government right now. You guys are talking about screwing us over later, but, we'll trust you. And then you had the government shutdown last October, which lasted for 40 some, 50 some days. And ultimately, the Democrats blinked and they were holding out for health care for American citizens. And did we get health care? No. They still haven't passed the ACA subsidies. Now they keep saying, well, we might still have time to be able to save it, but they haven't done anything yet. And the Democrats, gave away their bargaining chip as far as the government shutdown goes because they said, okay, well, we'll give that up. Let's reopen the government, all for a promise to maybe talk about the ACA subsidies down the road. Now they held one vote and it didn't pass. And that's really all they've done. I still think they're going to ultimately end up passing a 2 year extension, but I mean, if they pass anything at all at this point, I kind of figured they would have done it by now. They haven't. So who knows? Seems like they're both willing to, Democrats are pushing some to try to get things done, but how much can they really do? They're the minority party. They can't do a lot from the minority. So we're going to have to worry about the ACA subsidies and see if those things get passed, among other things. Now, when it comes to uh, the Democrats, I see a lot of people talking about, well, why aren't the Democrats doing more? Do they want it to fail? Maybe, maybe they have taken an idea of, you know, not my monkeys, not my circus. Not that they necessarily want the country to fail, but that what can they do? They're in the minority. They do not have a single shred of power in this government right now. Okay, they are not the president. That's Donald Trump, and the Republicans. House and the Senate both controlled by Republicans, and the 6-3 conservative majority, all three of them were appointed by Donald Trump because the Republicans played games with those seats. So they don't have a lot of power. The best they have is blocking things when it comes to using the filibuster in the Senate. And that's about where they're at. They're trying to do some things. Sure, you have like Al Green in Texas. I think he's tried 4 times to impeach Donald Trump. It hasn't worked. Um, the motions keep getting kicked down the road and kicked to committee and all kinds of things. You have Democrats trying to do things about health care and other things, but because they're in the minority, there's not a lot they can do. Now, the midterms are coming, okay? And we can vote our way out of this. I mean, we have to keep the pressure up and keep the protests going, etc. now. But the thing is, if we put enough pressure on the Republicans, they're going to decide that it's politically advantageous to change some things. And when they make those changes, it is going to be quick, fast, and in a hurry. It's going to be a drastic change. But until then, we have to keep putting pressure on them, and we have to keep working toward those midterms. Yes, I know midterms are 10 months away, and that new Congress doesn't take over for till January 3rd, and that's almost a year away. This last month has felt like the longest 6 months of my life. Um, but if we can't concede the midterms, okay? Just because it looks bleak right now, it's not a reason for us to not try. We have to fight because that's all we can do going forward is attempt to win the midterms. That's a start, okay? That gives us the House, maybe the Senate, where we can block some things that this administration is trying to do. And then from there, they can start putting up a campaign going forward um, to get the presidency and can retain Congress so a Democratic president can do a lot. Now, I was talking earlier about this idea of the Republicans removing Donald Trump. I want to cover a few things that I keep seeing being talked about that people get wrong. Okay. Well, and about what could happen if the Republicans remove Donald Trump. First of all, this is something a lot of people get wrong. The Article 4, Section 2, which talks about impeachment, says that you can remove the president, the vice president, and cabinet members for high crimes or misdemeanors. It does not, at least the way I read it, does not mean that if you remove the president, that you would remove everybody underneath them. I believe they would have to all be impeached and removed individually. All right, that's part one. So that's a high bar, right? You're talking they would have to pass impeachment articles against every single person in this administration in the House, and then 67 senators would have to vote to convict each and every member of this administration. That's a very, very high bar. So, probably not going to happen. We're going to have to pick and choose our battles. There may be a few that get removed, though. But if they remove Donald Trump, and that day may come, that gives us JD Vance. And JD Vance may do some of the heavy lifting for us. Why? Well, he would probably remove most of the cabinet, if not all of the cabinet, ask for their resignation, or straight fire them. And he may not do it all right away. He'd start with the ones that are making him look the worst. Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth. You get rid of those three, and you bring in your own. Now, uh, one of the things with JD Vance is I think even though he is not well liked, he's not feared like Donald Trump is. So the Republicans would be more willing to work with him. One and two, even though he's not well liked, he doesn't have the same uh, feel as Donald Trump or the same reputation, right? They wouldn't be as guilty by association for coming in trying to fix the problems. And even though I know that they are going to be trying to say, well, he's got to fix all of the problems the Democrats caused, it's going to be nothing but a blame game against Democrats. Um, that it's going to be their strategy, right? That he's going to try to curry favor and bring in better people. Now, if JD Vance gets, or if Donald Trump gets removed and JD Vance becomes president, one thing people get wrong: Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, will not be the vice president. Period. Okay. That only happens if something happens to JD Vance and Donald Trump at the same time. So, uh, JD Vance would get to appoint his own VP. Now, he may pick Mike Johnson. It would be a dumb choice, but he could pick Mike Johnson. But he'd appoint somebody, and there's a group of people I've seen, varying creators, talking about this idea that he might pick somebody normal, say Brian Kemp out of Georgia, and try to rehabilitate the Republican image. And that's entirely possible. Now, after that, JD would go through and probably clean house in the cabinet. Slowly but surely, he would get rid of a bunch of them, bring in his own people. And that would solve a big chunk of our problem, right? And as far as would he be able to get away with all the things Donald Trump is doing? No. Why? Because I think the Republicans are going to put him on a short leash. And they're going to say, we just got rid of Donald Trump. Do you think we won't do it to you too? So he's going to be walking a tightrope trying to limit his problems when it comes to stuff like that. And then they are going to try to move forward. Okay. Now, JD Vance would get to pick his own VP. Like I said, there's some talk that it could be somebody like Brian Kemp. Whoever it is would be the VP. And then if something happens with JD Vance, they would move up and that person would get to pick their own VP. Mike Johnson is nowhere in that line of succession unless both spots are vacant. Now, speaking of Mike Johnson, one of the other things I was talking about over on TJ the Plumber's Live the other night was it was one of the comments in the comment section. They were asking about what if Mike Johnson refuses to swear in the new Congress. Say Democrats win the midterms and they are going to become the next Congress, or they're going to have the majority, that Mike Johnson can just stop them from being sworn in. That is untrue. What and I know where people get the fear from it, and that in part that becomes from what Mike Johnson did earlier or at the end of last year with Representative Grijalva, and that was that he held her seat out for 6 weeks and he refused to swear her in. What will happen is come January 3rd, Congress will cease to exist temporarily. The new Congress will show up with all of the new members. And this is regardless of the fact it doesn't matter who gets elected, right? They could, if you had everybody that was running for reelection or that could be reelected, if they all ran and they all won, you elected exactly the same people in every race, and nobody changed. Congress still would cease to exist temporarily, and then they would start the next Congress. And they do that. They categorize the Congress every 2 years as a new Congress, in part because it helps keep track of when things were passed. Okay, it goes based on when the next election, or after the previous election, till the next election, et cetera. So they know, you know, passed in the 118th Congress, which is what I think we're in right now. You would have a time frame and you would know which Congress they're talking about. And then the next Congress would be 119 and then 120. And you would know as far as where and, in history these things got passed. But beyond that, first thing the House of Representatives has to do is they would have to select a Speaker of the House. Now, they would go through and they would do a vote. Assuming Democrats have control, they would all vote for the same person. Typically, they know going in who the speaker is going to be. And you have one round of voting, that person becomes speaker. It is always the majority party. And then, assuming it's Hakeem Jeffries for now, because I don't see who the next person would be, unless there's another leader that steps up inside the Democratic Party. Hakeem Jeffries would get given, he'd be given the oath of office for Congress by the House parliamentarian. I think that's the right person. It doesn't matter. It's like the chief. It's either like the chief of staff, the parliamentarian, something like that. Okay. Then he takes the oath of office. Then after he has taken the oath of office, assuming it's Hakeem Jeffries, he turns around and in one big group he gives the oath to the rest of Congress. Mike Johnson plays no role in that. The outgoing speaker plays no role in uh, any of that. So Mike Johnson cannot screw up the uh, swearing in of the new Congress. I know you're getting afraid, and it's easy to be fearful. And it's beyond that. Speaker of the House plays no role in swearing in of the Senate anyway, and that will just happen um, if they switch the majority. If the Democrats end up uh, being in the majority, I believe it is the majority leader who then swears in the rest. I could be wrong. It could just be the Senate parliamentarian swearing in all of the new members at once. Um, Either way, that will go off. The outgoing majority leader, I don't believe, can screw that up at all either. So those are a couple things that we can look forward to in the midterms or after the midterms, is that the Republicans can't prevent it. And it's easy to look around at everything going on and being fearful of everything and say, oh my God, we have to do something. Oh, we can't wait till the midterms. We have to do something. Peaceful protest is about the best we can do until it gets bad enough. I don't think it is time yet for an armed conflict. Um, that is, I think, the last straw. Thing Republicans don't realize is if Kamala Harris had won the election, and if she would have done everything Donald Trump is doing, most of the things that Donald Trump is doing, she was accused of wanting to do. But anyway, there would be calls on her side of the or on the Republican side of the aisle to get rid of her. What they don't understand is that we would not be celebrating the things she would be doing if she was doing everything that the Republicans are currently supporting. We do not worship our politicians. We do not uh, hold them above anything and say, "Well, oh, they're supporting it. We got to go along." No, if it's fucked up, we're going to call it out as fucked up and say so. And that's the big difference right now with Republicans and Democrats. Now, Republicans, I think, uh, ultimately will probably end up, once Donald Trump is gone, trying to soften their message and go back to sounding more like Bush era Republicans. Don't know if they'll be successful in that, but I think that is going to be what they attempt to do. All right, so I'm going to wrap up the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and We will see if Donald Trump ends up actually even acknowledging it. As of right now, and as of recording this podcast, I had not seen that he did anything to mark the occasion. And it wouldn't surprise me if he attempts to ignore it uh, in general, because he doesn't like the fact that it is celebrating somebody that is not himself. All right, so I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I hope you have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that TikTok live that I'm going to do later tonight. Um, by the time this probably won't go up, depending on how long it takes to upload before I'm already in the live. But keep a lookout for tomorrow for that TikTok live to end up being the podcast. Hope you have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.